When you think about your life, what do you think? Have you got life all figured out? If your life keeps playing out how it's going right now, would you be satisfied? Is your life like a dream that you don't want to wake up from, or is it more like a nightmare? If someone asked you if you feel lost, or if you feel like you're on the right track, what would you say?
What do you really want?
Lots of money.
Greater influence.
I want more respect.
More free time.
I need a bigger house.
I need a better job.
To be popular.
A better parent. To be famous.
Follow me.
Hey everybody, my name's Pete, and you are joining us for week 1 of a series that we're calling Follow Me. These are 2 words that we find Jesus saying all the time in the Gospels or the accounts of Jesus' life. He's often meeting people and he eventually invites them. He says, follow me. And what this series is going to be all about is asking the question, what does it look like to respond to this invitation? And what does it mean to call ourselves followers of Jesus? What does it mean to follow Jesus? And so today I want to talk about how do we begin this journey? How do we begin to respond? Where does this whole following Jesus thing begin? And I want to ask the question, what do you think Jesus would say to you the first time that he meets you? I want you to imagine you're meeting Jesus for the first time. What do you envision he says to you? I think the way that you answer this question actually says a lot about who you imagine Jesus to be. And so maybe you're someone who, when you think of Jesus, you imagine maybe some like mean, judgmental Christians in your life. Maybe you imagine some Christians that you've heard before, and they have a bit of like a scary story to tell. They have a little bit of a scary story. And so you're imagining like, well, if I met Jesus, and if he was anything like these people that I've met that follow him, he might say something like, all right, it's time to decide. Turn or burn. What's it going to be? Maybe you imagine like, if I was to meet Jesus, I'd imagine he'd like force me to a decision. That would probably be our first interaction. Or maybe you know that Christians believe a lot of things, and we believe a lot of things, a lot of important things about who Jesus is. And so you imagine, well, you know, these Christians, they believe so much about Jesus that I imagine if I were to meet Jesus, he'd probably have questions for me about if I believe the stuff that I'm supposed to believe. And maybe he'd say like, do you believe? Do you believe that I'm the Son of God? And it would be like, the interaction would be like a pop quiz. It would be this really important examination as I had a first encounter with Jesus. Or maybe you know Christians and they talk about Jesus and how much he loves you, and that Jesus is the incarnation of the God who is love. And so Jesus is just all love. And you imagine if I were to meet him, I would imagine he might like give me a big hug and just say, I love you so much. To which you might say, this is great, but we just met. And so I really like spending time with you too, Jesus. You're just not quite ready to respond with I love you because we just met. If you were to meet Jesus for the first time, what do you imagine he would say to you? I want to answer this question by looking in the Gospel of John. John was Jesus' best friend. He was a disciple of Jesus, and he eventually sits down and writes an account of Jesus' life to point people towards Jesus. And I want to look at the words that he places on Jesus' lips as the first words in his gospel, in his account of Jesus' life. Because you imagine, if you were writing this orderly account, you wanted to lead people to Jesus, you wanted them to experience what it was like to meet Jesus. It's really important with the first words, what every word that you place on the lips of Jesus, but especially the first words. And so I want to look at the story that John sets up of Jesus' first words in his gospel. The setup is like this. It says that John the Baptist, so different than John, our writer, but John the Baptist is the forerunner. And we get this picture that he is beginning to amass all of these disciples, and he's preparing the way for Jesus to come. And so he's amassing all of these disciples, and he's down by the river, and one day he sees Jesus walk by. And he says to all of his disciples, he points at Jesus and he says, there's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And then he goes on to explain how like this is the chosen one of God. This is the one that we've all been waiting for. And then it says the next day, the same thing happens. So in that first part, we still don't get to meet Jesus. In that first part, he's just a distant figure that we hear about. John is like building this climactic moment where we're like, there's Jesus, but we don't get to hear him. And finally, the next day, we're going to get to hear Jesus speak. And it says Jesus walks by again, and John says the same thing, "Behold the Lamb of God." But this time, two of his disciples begin to go and follow Jesus. And so this is where I want to pick up in the Gospel of John. He says this, "The next day, John was there again with two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, 'Look, the Lamb of God.' When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following, and he asked, 'What do you want?'" Isn't this a great first moment? You imagine, so Jesus, if we were to film this as a movie, you would see the disciples coming up behind Jesus, and you still don't see his face yet. And so you just see his back, and then finally Jesus notices that there's these guys following him. And so he turns, and you get this first shot of Jesus' face. And then you're like, what's he going to say? What are his first words going to be? And his first words are a question. Hey, what do you two guys want? What do you, some interpretations say, what is it that you're looking for, or what is it that you're seeking? I love this, partly because Jesus isn't like anxious to get a whole bunch of followers. He's not like, oh, thank goodness, I'm starting to get some people to follow me. I was really worried that John was going to get all of the followers. I love this because it's not like, he's not even beginning to teach. It's nothing like harsh. It's almost like a little bit risky that he's like, I'm going to begin with a question. And why does he ask this question? I don't think it's because he doesn't know the answer. I don't think that he's confused about the dynamic that is at play here. I think he asks this question because he wants these two guys to begin to reflect on this question. Hey, what is it that you guys actually want? What is it that you guys are actually looking for? I think that that's what Jesus wants them to reflect on as they begin to follow him. Think of it this way, that they have already begun to physically follow Jesus, right? They're walking behind him. And it's almost as if Jesus says, hang on, I want to pause everything right now. I want you to stop. And before we go any further on this journey, I want you to begin to reflect, hey, what is it that you're looking for? And I think that the reason that John gives us these words at the beginning of his gospel is because as John was writing this book for his community, these were the words that he wanted his community to begin to reflect on. As new people came into the community and they would hear the Jesus story for the first time, John wanted to introduce them to the way of following Jesus with these words. Hey, as you enter into this community and you begin to understand and begin to discover what it means to follow Jesus, I want you to begin by just slowing down and asking the question, what is it that you want? What is it that you are looking for? Such a great question because it dives deep into the heart of each one of us. It's basically the question, what is your deepest desire? I mean, try asking that question to somebody. Maybe pause the thing right now and just ask the people that are around you, ask somebody later this week, hey, what is it that you really want? For these first disciples, you can imagine that they probably would have said something like, we're looking for a leader. Like we were following John, and then John said we should follow you, and we're kind of anticipating that there's going to be this chosen one of God who's going to be a warrior type figure, and eventually you're going to lead us to get free from our Roman oppressors. That's what we want, Jesus. That's why we're following you. You can imagine that stories like that were probably in their mind. But right now, before we go any further in the sermon, I just want you to take a second and reflect and ask this question of yourself. What is it that you want? What is it that you're looking for? Maybe for some of you, the answer is, I would really love just like a family. I would love to find a wife that I love, and I'd love to be a great husband, and I'd love to have children, and I'd love to be a great father, and I would love to just have the family experience and for everyone to be healthy. Like, Jesus, that's what I really want. That's what I want deepest in my soul, is to be a part of a family. Or maybe some of you would kind of look both ways and you'd be like, okay, just between me and you, Jesus, I mean, I wouldn't say this to everybody, but just between me and you, I would really like to be really rich. I would love to have a ton of money. I mean Scrooge McDuck jumping off the diving board into the golden coins level rich. If you're asking me what I really want, that's what I want. I want to be really rich, Jesus. Maybe some of you would say I want adventure. I want to be able to travel the world. I want to be able to see amazing things. Some of you might just say, I don't want adventure as much as I just want stability. Like, could you just give me like a job that pays the bills and a comfortable home and just health so that I can live into my old age? Like, I just want like a basic life. That's all that I really want. Jesus, what is it that you really want? And how would you answer this question if Jesus asked you this question this morning? What is it that you really want? What is it that you are looking for? This is step one of following Jesus. This is like the preliminary. You want to begin to understand and learn what it means to follow Jesus. Ask yourself this question. But step two, I want to suggest to you, is that there is an ideal answer to this question. It's not like the answer. It doesn't have to be like, if you don't get this answer, then you can't follow Jesus. But I want to suggest to you that there is an ideal way to answer this question, that if you answer this question this way, will actually set you on a great trajectory for following Jesus. And the way that I want to answer this question is looking at Mark chapter 10, and there's going to be two stories that we're going to look at. And I think Mark puts these two stories side by side because he wants us to compare and contrast these two stories. And before we look at them, I want to give you the link between these two stories. The link is this, that in both of these stories, Jesus says the same question. And it's really similar to the question that we find in John chapter 1. In both of these stories, we're going to hear Jesus say, "What do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you?" So let's go to Mark chapter 10. Story number 1, Jesus and his disciples. It says, "Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee," these are two guys that have been following Jesus for a while now. They've heard Jesus teach. So these guys, James and John, they come to Jesus and they say, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask," which is one heck of a setup, right? Jesus, we're not going to tell you what we want. First, we want you to guarantee that you're going to give us whatever we want. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. Which, I mean, what kind of tone does Jesus say this in? Like, oh my goodness, guys. Like, seriously. "Hey, we want you to do whatever we ask." Okay, guys, what do you want me to do for you? They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." This is them asking for power. They're basically like, "Jesus, we understand you have a kingdom. You're going to be number one, clearly. But we're wondering if we could be like number 2 and number 3. We're just thinking like maybe if we're the first ones that ask, maybe we can have those spots. Maybe, Jesus." "You do not know what you are asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." Jesus is basically like, you guys don't understand really what you're asking for, and you're going to be able to follow me in some ways, but this question that you've posed, like I can't grant this to you. And then he continues and he wants to teach them something about how their whole perspective of what they want has been distorted. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. So when the other disciples heard this, they were angry at James and John. And Jesus called them all together and he said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So story number 1, Jesus, give us whatever we want. What is it that you want me to do for you? We want to be powerful. We want to be great. We want to sit at your right and your left. And Jesus is like, that's not how this works. And by the way, that's not even what I want you to be aspiring to, because I have come to be the servant of all. And so what I want you guys to be aspiring to is to also become the servant of all, just like me. So story number 1, Jesus says, what is it that you want? And these guys, they give a bad answer. They give the wrong answer. Story number 2. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and he said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and he came to Jesus. Jesus says this familiar question that we just saw in the previous story. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." And the blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus. "Your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and he followed Jesus along the road. And what is Mark doing here? He's put these two stories side by side, and we've got Jesus asking the same question in each story. In story number one, we have these disciples who just don't get it. And they give this answer where they think they know what they want, but they're actually wrong. And Jesus has to correct them. And we actually see that them thinking that they know what they want, thinking that they see what they want, actually gets in the way of them following Jesus. And then in story number two, we have a blind man who is crying out for mercy, who is crying out saying like, "I can't do anything but cry out and throw myself at your feet." And Jesus says to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And this man says, "Rabbi, I want to see." I think Mark puts these stories side by side so that we would see Bartimaeus' answer as the correct answer. That when Jesus asks us what we want, that we would say, I want to be able to see. It's like there's two types of people in life. There's people that know what they want. There's people with an agenda. And when Jesus says, "What do you want?" they think, "I know what I want. I can see it so clearly. Just give me the thing that I want." And Mark's like, do you see how that actually prevents you from following Jesus? How it actually gets in the way. But then there's other people who recognize, I'm lost. I've been trying so many things. I've tried this path and I've tried that path. I've tried to do all these good things and I've tried some things that were a little bit shady, and I've just been looking for life the whole time. I've been looking for joy. I've been looking for peace the whole time, and I can't find it anywhere. And so when Jesus asks me, "What do I want?" I have to confess basically, I don't know what I want. I recognize that I'm actually blind to what I really want, to the way that would actually lead me to life. So I'm going to ask you for the one thing that I think that I need, which is sight. I want to see. I think that Mark wants us to see that this is the posture, that if we take this posture, it actually leads us on a great trajectory to following Jesus. It's almost like Jesus were to say to us, like, "What do you want?" And we were to say, "I want to be able to see." That Jesus would kind of give a bit of a smile and say, I can work with this. Come, follow me. And so I want to ask you a couple questions to reflect on today. The first one is this: do you actually want Jesus to open your eyes? Do you actually want him to open your eyes? And the reason why I ask that question is because it's one thing to say I want him to open my eyes. Of course, I want to find true life. I want to find abundant life. But along that journey is going to mean a lot of change. And this kind of change can actually be a little bit painful along the way as we realize that Jesus is going to expose some of the darkness within us. Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes to how in love with stuff you are? Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes to how much you love money? Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes to how you have created an idol of your family? Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes to just how selfish you are and how all of your thoughts all day long, myself included, are just about me and how I can take care of me? Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes to how little you care for the concerns of the poor and the refugee and the outcast and the sinner? Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes and expose you to the truth? I know you might say, like, of course I want that, but a lot of people don't actually want that when they get a little taste of it. A lot of people actually just want Jesus to confirm what they already believe or to confirm the agenda that they already have in place. And if that's how we come to Jesus, I think that Jesus would say to us, following me isn't going to do anything for you. If you come and you begin to follow me with a posture of, I already know what I want, I don't want you to open up my eyes, I don't want you to show me anything new, I think Jesus would be like, sure, come along for the ride, but what's the point? And time after time in the Gospels, we see this story play out. We see that Jesus is constantly surrounded by large groups of people, and yet not all of these people have a true desire that they actually want to see. We see the Pharisees always around Jesus, but they don't want to see. They actually think that they have to open up Jesus' eyes. They're not coming to Jesus saying, help us see. They're like, Jesus, you've got it wrong. We need to help you see. You see people always around Jesus, but it seems like what they want the most is the miracles and give us the bread. And when Jesus begins to teach and he wants to open up their eyes, you see that the crowds slowly disperse. And then, of course, you've got the disciples who travel with him every day for 3 years. And while there's high moments, there's also lots of low moments where they're like, you know what, this is too hard. I'd rather not see what you're trying to teach me here, Jesus. Do you really want Jesus to open your eyes? And just a warning, just in case if you're a Christian like me, if you're someone who says, I'm a follower of Jesus, and you might be thinking, Pete's talking to the people that aren't followers of Jesus right now. Let me just give you a warning that often throughout history, Christians have been the worst at allowing Jesus to open up our eyes. I could give countless examples of ways that the church was either slow to allow Jesus to reveal something new to us or just never made it in the first place. But let me give you the most recent example, the pandemic. How many of us, when the pandemic hit and we had to close down the church, how many of us said, you know what? The church is going to be fine. The church is Jesus. Nothing can overtake the church. So let me pray to Jesus. Jesus, would you open my eyes to how we can continue to be the hands and feet of your body here during this pandemic time? How many of us prayed that? And how many of us were praying, God, would you just let us go back to normal? We would give anything just to go back to normal. And we decided that was the only thing that we wanted to see. And we've been blind for almost a year now to the other ways that Jesus has been operating in our city and in our lives because we didn't want him to open our eyes. We didn't want to go through the pain of the change that involves. Question number 1, do you really want Jesus to open your eyes? And question number 2, it's really similar. Do you trust Jesus enough to let him open your eyes? Do you actually trust that Jesus has the best answer to the question, what is it that you want? That Jesus has the best answer to what it is that will truly bring you fulfillment and an abundant life. And if you can answer yes to those questions, then I want to give you a really simple prayer to pray this week, and it's this. Jesus, I want to see. Jesus, I want to see. Would you show me the new places that you want to take me, and would you open my eyes and show me things that I have been blind to up until this point in my life? Jesus, I want to see. Back to John chapter 1. In that interaction, Jesus asks these 2 disciples this question, what do you want? And the disciples respond, but they don't really answer the question. Instead, they say, teacher, where is it that you're staying? Which is like them getting on to the question of you know what, we don't really know what we want. We're kind of following you because John pointed us this way, and we're not really sure what you're all about, but what we do know is that we think that maybe you have the answers. And so our answer to your question, what do we want? We just want to be near you. We just want to follow you and be in the house that you're in. So where are you staying? And Jesus, I imagine, again, with a bit of a smile towards these 2 guys, says to them, come and see. This is the beginning of the journey that I want us to take for the next 5 weeks as we move towards Easter. It's the beginning of our relationship with Jesus, that we hear him ask, what is it that you really want? And we respond, I'm lost and I'm blind. I don't really know, but I just want to be near you. Can we do that? Can I just be near you? And then we would hear Jesus say to us, good. That's a good answer. Come and see. Let me pray for you before we end today. God, we just come with a simple prayer that Jesus, by your Spirit, you would open our eyes. Jesus, we confess that we don't have all the answers. We confess that our desires are not what they should be and that we don't desire correctly. And often we desire things that only bring us pain and death. So would you help us to see? Would you open our eyes? Jesus, show us the things that we've been blind to. Show us the places that you want us to go and the person that you want us to become. We ask these things in your strong name. Amen. Grace and peace be with you guys.